Hey guys, and welcome to another little Star Wars 5e. Almost said Star Wars Galaxies. Star Wars 5e little uh, tips and tricks and all sorts of things. Today I'm going to take a look at another creating a character in of sorts in a way. As usual, please forgive my inability to speak. Compared to my last video, I actually have the ability to speak a little bit better. Like I'm not hoarse or anything anymore, but uh, my brain still goes a million miles a minute, as you can probably tell here. And if you guys didn't know this before, um, everything I do is unscripted to try to make this a little bit more lively, as well as it saves me a bunch of time with my busy schedule. So again, today we are going to actually go over Starships of the Galaxy and creating a starship. Now, for you players, this is typically something that your GM or DM is going to do, but don't let that deter you from this. There's a lot of important rules and explanations that you would need to learn through here. So the first thing I want to talk about with starships is, you know, when they go into the step by step. Obviously, the first step here is acquire a starship, but there's a bit more to that. So this is mainly for the GM and stuff that you need to think about on whether or not a starship is important or useful within your world. And players try to understand this if the campaign or the setting that the GM has built means there's no real need for a starship. Don't pester him to do so. Building a starship, in the sense of like building the actual character sheet of it, is very difficult. It's very time consuming, and it can be a bit of a hassle. I know most of you who are probably looking at this have probably looked up videos and tutorials online before, and they are a little out of date. So for anyone watching this in the future, this is being made, if you can see there at the bottom of my screen, 10 minutes after midnight. I just got home from work on November 20th of 2022 to date this video. So this may or may not be outdated in the future. So keep that in mind. This is as of right now, this is how it stands. So back to what I was saying, acquiring a starship for your campaign. There's a couple of things you have to think about. First and foremost is a starship, or having a starship, going to be useful for the campaign? Okay. By no means is owning and operating a starship in this game cheap. Just like everything else, it has levels. As you do things with your starships, they level up, and then in order to actually upgrade them, it costs lots and lots and lots of credits. So if you're going on a sort of mission where they're kind of hiding and they're not really doing anything, or there's no real way for them to earn credits, this might not be the best bet. So a couple things you have to look at within your actual campaign setting of whether or not this is useful is where does the story take place? Okay. Is this a story that takes place on a single planet? Obviously, if so, there's no real need for a starship. Now, does it incorporate multiple planets? And if the answer is yes, then what is the means of travel between said planets? Okay. If your campaign is taking place during, say, the Clone Wars, maybe they have access to a Venator or an acclimator that they can just kind of hop on as a transport that will take them from place to place. So therefore, there's no need for them, the players, to actually own and operate one, because they just are kind of sort of given one that you don't need to do anything with creating their own ship there. Are they able to take some sort of like local transport or public transport from place to place, right? Is this like, are they Jedi and whatnot that are hiding after Order 66? And if they need to blend in, would be better for them to buy tickets and whatnot on public transports to get from planet to planet and so on and so forth. Um, one time frame, one era, I would say would probably be really useful to using a starship is if you are going to be playing really anything Old Republic-ish era. And maybe if you're doing like just prior to the Clone Wars um, sort of thing, because those those eras tend to have lots of things happening on several planets that all kind of correlate. There's tons of Sith, so if you're playing the bad guys, it makes sense. Tons of Jedi and troopers all working together, doing all of these missions across the galaxy. So having, say, like the starships within the Star Wars: The Old Republic game series would be very useful, or even their own version of the Ebon Hawk from the Knights of the Old Republic series. So then the next step with that is determining what type of starships would be utilized or necessary for your group, your players, right? And the first thing you're going to look at with that is actually the number of players you have. So if you see here, starships are categorized by size. And I will get into the explanation here in a second of every single one of these. But if you only have 2 or 3 players, okay, then you would probably go with a small aircraft. These are things like the X-Wings, the TIE Fighters, ARC-170s, Y-Wings, stuff like that. Maybe, oh, this is also includes like LAAT gunships and whatnot, small transports and whatnot. Okay, if they don't have the means, or if it's a small group of people, then they're not going to have, probably won't have enough people to operate a medium starship. These are your Ebon Hawks, the Twilight, the Millennium Falcons, stuff like that. Okay. So if you're, like I said, if you only have a few players, maybe a small starship would be the best. And then if you have, I would say probably 5 to 8, you're probably looking at the medium size. And every ship larger than that, the large, the huge, and the gargantuan, these these are very, 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 very rarely ever going to be used in a campaign. Uh, your these are more if they are building an army and they want to put money into a particular thing. Or one thing I can see is if they operate, or if they are in charge of a small sort of like light cruiser sort of thing, say like a Raider class or a CR-90 Corvette, something like that, where they themselves don't necessarily deal with the ins and outs of it. There's going to be a bunch of NPCs that actually man a lot of the stations, but that's kind of like their home that they kind of go off and do their missions from. That's another potential. But anything larger than that, Venators, Star Destroyers, huge carriers or battleships, unless you're playing a game of like 50 people, there's no real reason to go anything that larger. But they are in here to build mostly for story building, or if they, if you do take the campaign in that direction of kind of sort of building an army or a fleet or some sort of large organization in which they have some of these larger ships to utilize. So with that, let's explain each of the different ones. I'm not going to go through here just like I did with the playable classes. I'm not going to go and read through every single one of these. I'm going to give you kind of sort of a rundown of each one of these. So the first one that I want to talk about really is the tiny ships. Okay, these aren't actually, if you read it there, these are all, for the most part, unmanned or droid aircraft. Okay, these aren't really ships themselves, with the exception of the droid tri-fighter. Um, that would technically be classified as a tiny ship, as it's very, very, very small, and it's just a droid brain. It doesn't really have a pilot or anything else in it. But these aircraft, this size of starship, and that's starship in quotations, these are mostly for a storytelling thing. So if you want if you want your characters to have a remote control drone or probe, that is technically a tiny ship. Um, if you want to create for some reason like a remote control missile, same thing. That's all under here. I'm not going to get into too much of it, but the tiny ships are basically, think of them as unmanned drones, right? UAVs, UASs, stuff like that. They are either remotely controlled or controlled by a droid brain. And they don't typically live very long. They kind of do their one little purpose, and that's it, with the exception of like tiny droid fighters and probes. Now, small aircraft. As I said earlier, these are the ones that do, or these are your TIE fighters, your X-Wings and stuff like that. Your, well, obviously small, usually single-seater, like a dual seat. Okay, these are your strike craft is the best way I can put it. Like I said, these are good if you have a small group of people, or if you are doing one of those campaigns where, like, say they have like a Venator Star Destroyer that usually takes them from, battlefield to battlefield or mission to mission. Maybe you have some of those instances where they have a space battle. You can give your players a small ship here. That would make sense there. They would be able to level it up as needed. You can kind of cut some corners. The fact saying, oh, they have all those clone engineers and whatnot that can do upgrades from time to time, and that you can kind of bypass the credit limit there, or the credit requirement. Obviously, that is up to you. But with this, I want to start going into something that kind of happens with every single classification, every single size of ship. And that is, at tier 0 here, you choose the role. I'm not going to go into each and every one of these. They are, for the most part, self-explanatory. But they are important because this is part of the creating a ship. This is where you get like your normal stats, your ability score improvements, and a couple of other things. So at tier 0, which I will explain how all that works here in a minute, you choose one of these roles. Think of it as like choosing a fighting style for, your character. However, later down the road, you will see that you get to choose again. This is a little confusing. I was looking at them and I was wondering, do you pick these at the same time? Not at the same time. Do you always have to take the same one that you took as before, or can you mix and match them? And personally, I recommend that you stick with whatever you chose. So if you chose to make a bomber, every subsequent level up where you get to choose one of these, stick with that particular one. There are some instances where you may be able to kind of mix and match, but for the most part, I would stick with whatever you chose. And that goes for not just small ships, but large ships, medium ships, everything. If you choose a particular role, when you get to these specializations and masteries at higher tiers, just stick with the one that you got. There is a little bit of room where you can mix and match. Say here, if you are making a bomber, maybe you would, here, second tier, you take scramblers, so you can kind of say like your bomber has like, not an EMP, what's the word? Like radar jamming to help with their bombing and be a little bit more protective. Certain things like that you can kind of sort of mix and match. So just be careful with that. Next on to the medium ships, as I said earlier, these are things like your Ebon Hawk, your Millennium Falcon, your Twilight, maybe. I think, right? These are good home base ships, as I would put them, right? If your party is traveling from planet to planet and they don't really have a home and they want some sort of like home base sort of thing where they can chill and relax, something to return to after missions, this is perfect. Okay, just think of the Ebon Hawk from Knights of the Old Republic series, where that was your home. Everyone kind of had their own little spot. Uh, you're able to, what's the word? Configure the interior of the ship to match particular players. If there's someone who likes to do a lot of crafting and whatnot, you can get like workstations put into it. And then if you have the Jedi, you can have like the meditation chambers. If you have like a soldier, you can put in an armory, which has like a firing range in it and all sorts of stuff, right? Everyone can kind of have like their own little special area within the ship. Same thing, these do have all those different roles. I'm not going to go into each one. They are kind of self-explanatory. With the medium ships, they are a little bit more versatile when it comes to, like, if you still choose a role at tier 0, you can kind of same thing, mix and match a few of them, because these are larger ships. They are capable of doing one or more jobs. But I would make sure that you kind of keep it. If you have a particular idea for an aircraft or a ship, then I would choose one of these that are going to be more like it, right? So you can always upgrade. Say you wanted something like the Millennium Falcon, which is a freighter, and you want something a lot more like that because you're playing bounty hunters and you're out on the fringe and stuff like that. You can still upgrade them with tons of weaponry and kind of turn them into your own sort of gunship or even a missile boat. They're just not going to be as effective as it because they are mainly a freighter. But you get around that with just good dice rolls, players taking lots of levels in a particular deployment. Now, large ships. These are your CR-90 Corvettes, your Nebulon Bs. They're not your carriers, they're not your battleships, they're not the ship of the line. They are more what fills in the small portions in between these large ships, or the huge ships, technically. These are things, like I said, like the what's it called? The Raider. I think it's called the Raider. The one that Inferno Squad has in the new Battlefront 2. These are good if you're kind of, some sort of militarily important special forces or something, and you want them to either be like attached to that particular ship or have some sort of command over that ship. But the important thing with that is that you're going to need a lot more people than you're going to have players to man all these stations and their crew requirements and so on and so forth. So a lot of that's going to be NPCs. So if you have, so that means that the game that you're playing, they have to be someone of importance to command having a ship under them like that. You're not going to play, a couple of Jedi and a bounty hunter sort of thing that are running from, the Sith out in some, steal some. We'll say it again. They steal their own version, their own raider. Like, those 3 people are not going to be able to operate that entire ship. Okay, nor are they going to draw enough attention to themselves where they are able to man or get the following to man such a ship. So these things, again, several different roles. Uh, Mix and match very, very carefully. I recommend that you pick one and you stick with it every time you get one of these options. Now I'm going to go over huge and gargantuan at the same, well, no, we'll do them separately. Huge ships. These are the things that we, when we think Star Wars space battles, these are kind of the things that we think of, right? The Venator Star Destroyers, Star Destroyers in general, the Mon Calamari cruisers, stuff like that. Those are these. These are those giant ships that have hundreds and thousands of personnel on them. Again, with your typical player base, you're not going to actually be in charge of or leveling this thing up. You're going to have it, you're going to be attached to it, maybe in command of it. Not really going to level these throughout the system or throughout the campaign, sort of thing. You're just kind of gonna be like that one-stop shop of like in between missions and stuff like that. They are really good for like space battles and whatnot, and they're great for storytelling. And they can be a sort of reward, I guess you can say, of importance when you get to that portion of like a campaign. Like if we'll stick with the Jedi and whatnot, running from, are hiding from the Empire. Maybe eventually they join the Rebels. They do a couple of missions, and they kind of move up like the importance, I guess you can say, like the ranks of the Rebel Alliance. And then eventually they are given command of their very own calamari cruiser or something. That's like they themselves kind of work up to it. You can give it to them like immediately right there at tier 5, which is the highest you can go. Give them everything that they need, so on and so forth. These aren't ships that you are typically going to level from the beginning. If you can find a way to do that, I ask you to message me and let me know, because it's something I've been trying to figure out for a while. These ones I highly, highly, highly recommend picking one role and sticking with it. Okay? You can have a battleship and give it a hangar so that they can have a few starships on them. But if you want a carrier, go carrier. If you want a battleship, stay battleship. Do not, I highly recommend against I highly recommend against mixing and matching on these. Lastly, gargantuan. These are not actual ships. Okay? Well, sorta. How do I put this? Gargantuan ships, think like dreadnoughts. If you think of, what was it? Was it episode 9 or was it episode 8? I don't know. I don't like those 3 movies. But they have the dreadnought with the giant cannons on them. It was 8, because 9 is when Palpatine has somehow returned. These are your dreadnoughts. Okay, these are what are they called? What are they called? The Malevolence class, CIS ships. Okay, they are freakishly huge. That's what these things are. These are really, for the most part, if you are having one of these in a campaign, more than likely, it's an enemy. Or a storytelling piece. I would assume the Starhawk from the Squadron the Squadron game. There goes my brain, million miles a minute, like I tell you guys all the time. I would believe that would probably be a gargantuan ship. So again, these are mostly going to be storytelling devices, an enemy, something along those lines. It's not really going to be something that your players are going to utilize. Now, there is a sort of variant of these. I don't know if it's in this chapter or not. Does not look like it. And that is space stations. Yes, you can have them build their own Death Stars. Again, this is going to be one of those things where they're not really going to have the credits to do so, but they technically can. Um, it's more going to be a story device. It's not going to be like something that they're going to, level up. Obviously, space stations cover more than just the Death Star. You can have the rings around a planet that build starships is technically a space station. Small little uh, outposts like, say, Tansari Point Station. Let me know in the comments if you know what that place is from. Uh, and stuff like that, where they just kind of, it would be like a home base that they would have to return to, and it's not something that they take with them usually. So now to the nitty gritty that you guys are probably wondering about. How do I actually make starships for myself or uh, my my players? So after you figure out, are they going to have, and you the DM figure out if they are going to have individual starships that are of the small category, or if you have enough for a medium ship. This is where the fun begins. So luckily, under the assets, they do have a form fillable. You'd have to download this in order to actually fill it out. Starship character sheet. And as you can see, it's very similar to that of an actual character sheet. Here we go. Step by step. Here we go. So, step one, acquire it. That is just, you get a ship somehow. You tell the story until they get a ship. Whether it's given to them, they build it, so on and so forth. There's all sorts of rules governing how that happens. Every time you get a ship, tier, where's it at? Ship class, so this would be small, medium, large, whatever, and tier, starts at tier 0. Now, obviously, if they get it like way later in the campaign, you could give them a tier 1 or a tier 2. And it's a lot of going between this page and the page of whatever size starship you're looking for, as well as the role, and looking at the role that they got. So, and then going to modifications and equipment to figure out what that all means. I want this one. I'm going to tell you about the ability scores. This is the most important thing that I have spent forever and a half trying to figure it out, and I spent hours reading through this trying to figure things out. This works just like a regular character sheet would, right? You can do the point buy system. You can do the one where it gives like a 15, a 14, a 13, 12, and I think like and then a 10 and an 8, and you can put them where you want them. You could do the rolling 4d6s, subtracting the lowest or removing the lowest result and adding up the remaining 3. That is entirely up to you, the GM, how you want to do it. In this particular sense, I recommend, I don't like highly recommend or anything like that, I just kind of recommend going with the standard array, the 15, the 14, and so on and so forth. Because that's what a lot of ships that you'll come across kind of follow that particular thing. That particular way that they are made. And it just makes things really easy to, is the ship better or worse than this particular thing? Because you could roll, if you do the roll system, you could end up with all 18s here and just have a ship that's good at everything. And if you're trying to be one particular ship, you don't want to be good at everything. It kind of ruins the story a bit. So where was I? Here, I did something. What's this? Step by step. No, this is the size. I want this one. Sorry, guys. So with this, it's a lot of just figuring out what you want and going to, we'll say, we're making a gunship, right? So you figure out by looking here, oh, gunships are big on strength. So you would put strength as your highest, maybe constitution as a second, so on and so forth down the line, right? And it tells you like, oh, what kind of armor I have. Oh, it has reinforced armor and a power core this and blah blah blah. So you would actually go to equipment. So reinforced armor. Oh, it has an armor class bonus of a plus of a -2. Hold on. Was it lightweight or was it reinforced? It was reinforced. Doo-doo-doo. Trying to find things. Like I said, this is the fun thing. Is like figuring out your armor class is 10. So you know that. So then yeah, then you would subtract 2 from that because of. Oh, scroll back down here again. Reinforced equipment. Reinforced has a -2 armor class bonus. So now you're down to an 8. However, you get extra hit point or hit dice for all sorts of things. Same things with the types of shields you get. All this, if you're making a ship, I'm telling you right now, read, 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 read slowly, read carefully, and read it a million times. There is a lot that I could go over, and I could be here for hours and hours explaining how this works for you guys. Just read it slowly, read it carefully, and then read it again. Uh, these is the kind of confusing part. Is like all of like the extra stuff that you have. So medium ships. Where's it at? Medium ships. Where's it at? Modifications. Maximum suites, minimum of 0. 3 plus your constitution modifier. Modification slots, 30. Stock modifications, your choice of 1 suite modification and 1 non-suite modification. This is all at tier 0. You can get all sorts of stuff and you get more things as you level up. You can pay credits to add more. Again, read, read, read. But I'm going to explain to you guys what this part right here means. This is the sort of confusing part. So under modifications, there are basically 2 types. There used to be like a drop down that I can just, here it is. Okay, so there are basically 2 types. Ignore the fact that there's several here, right? You have suites and then what I call attachments, right? So suites, think of these as internal rooms. Okay? These are rooms that you can go into. They do things, they take up space on the interior of the aircraft. As a medium ship, am I on the right spot? Yep. On a medium ship, you have a maximum of 3 suites plus your ship's constitution modifier. Okay? This is how many rooms within the ship you can get. And it's like this for just about everything. I believe like small ships don't really have any suites. Yeah, 1 plus your ship's constitution modifier, and it has to be of like a certain size. Yeah, see, stock modifications, your choice of 2 non-suite modifications because you don't really have an interior on these ships. Sorry, -1. It actually says -1 plus your ship's constitution modifier. Yeah, certain things like you can technically have a small ship that might have like an onboard armory or something they store underneath, or like a small bed on the interior so you can sleep during long space travel flights and stuff like that. It's kind of what it's saying. Like you're not going to have a TIE fighter with a luxury like hotel suite sort of thing inside of it, and barracks room for 4 people. Like that's not how that works. That starts on the medium. So then you have these base modification slots. So if I go back to modification and I switch this to just say universal, because it's more important. Oh, hold on. I'm going to go back to suites real quick. You can see that a lot of these tell you like you have to have this size of a ship, right? Yeah. Crew expansion. You integrate an additional seating arrangement in your ship. So this is like if you want a co-pilot or something. But a lot of these, ship large, medium. Technically, anybody can have this. Though I don't see how your TIE fighter is going to have a holding cell. But okay. Oh, that tells you right there. Starship size. Oh no, one does say one. Small does say one. You can hold one person in your small ship. Cool. Don't know how that works, but somehow it does. But here we go. Let's see where it's at. Modification categories. Modification time frame. Okay. So modification time. So this 30. I'm gonna bring it back here. 30 slots. You can have 30 things on your aircraft, right? On or in your aircraft. You can have three plus your ship's constitution modifier for a medium ship. Internal rooms. So that takes, if you do that, we'll say you have a constitution modifier of +0. So you use all three of them. Then you still have 27 slots of things that you can put on here. And that is all this stuff. And this is where things get, like I said, they take a while. Because there are lots of things. There's 257, and a medium ship. Like a lot of people utilize a medium ship. Like I said, Ebon Hawk, Millennium Falcon, BT-7 Thunderclaps, stuff like that. 30 slots to start with, or maximum. That could take you a while to do. You don't have to do all 30 slots at the beginning. I would recommend you take your stock, right? Your choice of a one suite modification and one non-suite. And if you're building, like I would build it out to what your players need. But so get your 3-ish rooms if you can. And then obviously you're going to want a couple of weapons. Maybe like a droid interface, a particular automated protocols, stuff like that. Like kind of fill it out as you need for like the base. You don't have to get all 30 slots in one go though. And I kind of recommend against it. Because as the game goes on, you will figure out more of what you need and the players can then make those adjustments as needed. All that gets put on here. A lot of these, like I said, so this is one thing I want to draw attention to for a second. Role specialization. This is why, for the most part, I say to just choose one, and that's what you go for. If you're a gunship, you write gunship here, and you will only ever get the gunship upgrades. Because this is really the only spot in the entire readout that says you choose it, and that's all you get. Everywhere else says like you pick one with every other type, but it's not reflected on this. Flying speed, turning speed. These took me forever to find. This used to be a calculation that you had to do. I want to say it was like your strength, dexterity, and your constitution, plus a couple other numbers. Blah, it was plus and minus this. There was this times this, minus this, plus this, or something. It was really weird. Now it's simple. You choose one. That is your turning, or that is your flying speed. That is your turning speed. Makes it so much easier. And yes, you can change these with all sorts of upgrades that you can get. Hyperdrive class, that will be told to you. That's another thing. no ship really starts with a hyperdrive, so I would get the modification to have a hyperdrive. And then whatever you get determines your hyperdrive class. Your shield point maximum, hit points maximum, that is all determined by this stuff right here and how they work. Again, read, read, read. See if anything else on here that I used to get super confused on. Nope, for the most part, the rest of this is pretty self-explanatory. Okay? But when it things like I said, the things I used to get confused on were these here, your ability scores. I recommend just the basic array 15, 14, 13. Hold on. 15, 13, 15, 14, 13, 12, 10, and 8. I think that's how it went. That's what I recommend. And then your flying speed and turning speed is told to you right here. And the rest of this, just by looking at what you get, I mean, that kind of works. Tells you what all the rest of this is. Now, to the players. The next important thing. I can get rid of all that. Deployments. These are the jobs that you have within an aircraft. Most of the time, these are going to be utilized in medium-sized ships or larger. But if you are flying small, this is more like that's your pilot, your gunner, and I think that's really it. Maybe operator. For the most part, yeah, that's the three that you're going to use there. You can take levels in these, and they will give you some sort of like little bit like coordinator. Will help you with the other players in their own ships and kind of helping them, telling them what to do. The rest of these two are mostly going to be used in medium sizes or larger. Okay. Now, just like classes and everything, I'm just going to kind of give you guys a quick rundown on of what each of these are, and then I'll go into explaining how you level these. So the coordinator, this is basically the person on the comms telling everybody what to do. This is the leader kind of area. It helps people, like you give bonuses to dice rolls for the other particular deployments. Gunner, pretty self-explanatory. You sit on a gun, you shoot stuff. Pilot, pretty self-explanatory as well. You fly the ship. Mechanic. This is all about controlling. So whatever you're doing in a ship takes energy. And certain parts of the ship have to have certain amounts of energy in order to do anything. The mechanic is the person who diverts the power to where it's needed to do all sorts of stuff. Pretty important role. You won't really do much, but kind of like, hey, what do you need? Well, I need this much power. Okay, what do you need? I need this much power. Okay, I'm giving this much to this guy and this much to this guy, and I'm taking it from this guy. Technician coordinates the defense of the ship, including running the shield projectors. This is the defense guy. This is the guy that tries to keep the ship intact. Flies, shoots, within the ship sort of defense thing. Operator, this is like your co-pilot sort of thing. This is going to be the guys that utilize tracking devices, the tractor beams, possibly like locking on missiles and stuff, scrambling, jammers and stuff like that. That is all this. They are where the coordinator tries to buff the people within the ship. The coordinator basically tries to debuff the enemy ships. Okay. Now, all of these have set of tiers that give you a bunch of bonuses. I'll just look here as you go through. uh, you can level all of these. Um, you can take turns and who's pilot, and that person, so the next person gets experience so that they can become a tier 1 or a tier 2 pilot. Uh, so on and so forth. You can reach tier 5, which is the max in every single one of these. It's going to take a good bit. So I recommend, depending on the number of players you have, everybody picks one or two one or two of these, and that is where they go. Players, talk to your DM, talk to your other players, and figure out, who wants to be what. And one thing that I've kind of put into my own games is look at the class you're playing. If you're playing the fighter and you're all about shooting things, then you should probably be a gunner, right? If you're playing the engineer, mechanic, or a technician, Jedi make great pilots because you can say like, oh well, I have the Force and I can see into the future and I can dodge incoming attacks and stuff like that. Obviously, anybody can be a pilot. Scholars make great coordinators. Engineers are also good for operators. So kind of look at like how you're playing a particular character and say, well, it would make sense for me to play this particular thing because it's right in line with what my character does when we're on the ground. Doesn't have to be that way. You could be a scholar who, for the most parts, for whatever reason, like a pacifist, all you do is buff everyone around you and then make them the gunner, and they go and blow up everything. You don't have to. Just saying. So basically the way that how gaining ranks in these work is by, they used to have a chart here. I don't know where it went. Probably under adventuring. Hold on. Time, flying speed. Oh, it's not in here anymore. Deployments. I'm sorry, folks. I'm like taking a look here and trying to see if they explain how it works again, and it does not look like they do. Customization options. Hmm. I guess it's not in here. Sorry about that, folks. But basically, I'll have to find the chart one day. But basically, how it goes is like every time you do an encounter, you have to do so many encounters within a particular. What am I trying to say? I can't think. After you do so many encounters as a coordinator, you go to the next tier. Right. After so many of a gunner, you go to the next tier within gunner. It's something like that. It's something like, I wanted to say you had to have like 16 encounters. In Yeah, you have to have 16 encounters utilizing one particular deployment to reach tier 5. So that's 16. Like, I know it doesn't sound a lot, but if you're taking into account that you're probably doing multiple of these, that could take a while. I wonder if it's here. I'm gonna search for it. Not spelled to your right, I think. Oop. Oh, here it is. Starts deployment rank 0 after achieving 1 rank after completing their first successful encounter. The GM may decide, however, that character started first rank higher, blah, blah, blah. Hmm. So they may have changed this, and that's kind of characters who 5th rank across their deployments may want to continue progressing their starship skills. Blah blah blah. Higher deployment. Achievement 5th mount prestige cards by 50. Achievement 6th rank. However, additional 100 prestige, 600, 200 total. That wasn't useful. I will get back to you guys on how this works in another video, but for the most part, how it works from how it used to be is that uh, after a certain amount of encounters, you got so much prestige, and you needed so much prestige in order to rank up. So it was basically, you need to do 16 encounters to reach 5th, 5th at anything. But everything here is a little bit wonky. So I will look into that for you guys at a later time. All right. Well, guys, that's gonna finish it up for this. I hope that helps a little bit. Please ask me questions in the comments. I'll get to you as often and as quickly as I can. Um, it's not the best video, but hopefully it brings you a little bit more up to speed than what is out there already. Thank you guys. This has been Jack signing off.